Hi, I'm Animal Trades, and today I'm going to talk to you about how we built this table.
I've been pretty lucky in the past to have scored all kinds of free or nearly free metal for my metal projects as add-ons to various Craigslist deals, but I didn't have anything beefy enough on hand to use to fabricate the legs I would need for this project, so it was off to the steel yard we went. We got a 30-foot long piece of 10 gauge 3x1 steel tubing and some flat stock for the legs and mounting brackets. As with every project that Nick and I have worked on together, there was a whole lot of laughing along with the working, and especially when it came to the metal work, it was really great to be working with someone who could keep teaching me more along the way. It's also been really helpful to work with Nick in his shop because as I'm getting my own metal shop set up at the farm, he's given me so many ideas about how to utilize a small space and set it up for quick and efficient work. For me, building things is far more about the relationships in and around the projects I do than the physical objects I produce. I started working in my grandpa's shop as soon as I could hold a hammer. I loved building with him because I loved being with him. All through my childhood, I built go-karts so I could use them with friends, tree forts for sleepovers, bunny cages so my mom and I could raise rabbits together. You get the idea. 7 years ago, when I decided to start making furniture, it was because people that I looked up to and admired were doing the same, and I wanted to have an excuse to spend more time with them. I learned how to turn wood because my mentor turned, and I really just wanted to hang out with him in his shop. The spinning wheel he and I have been working on for 5 years. It hasn't taken that long because it's that complex of a project. I just would really like to have an excuse to keep hanging out with him. The Sittners, the people that I built this table for, were some of my first farmer friends in the Seattle area. 2 years ago, right after we moved to the farm, when we had a bumper crop of apples, they offered to lend me their cider press. Because we were practically strangers back then, that generosity really made an impact on me. We started chatting about spoon carving and woodworking, other farm stuff, and quickly realized that we had a lot more than a love for apple cider in common. The Sittners have asked me a few times in the past about doing various commissions for them, but we could never quite get our schedules to match up. This year, though, Mrs. Sittner asked me if I would be willing to make a Father's Day gift for her husband, and before I said no because I was too busy, I called my buddy Nick to ask if I might be able to hire him to help me make sure that the project got done on time. As usual, he was there to help in a pinch, so I told her yes, we could do it, no problem. He and I came up with a design that we both liked, and we went to work. I got really spoiled on this project working with Nick because, as it turned out time-wise, Nick ended up having to do a lot of the setup, teardown, and cleanup work, and I got to show up just for the fun parts. He did the majority of the metal cutting, jig making, grinding, sanding, and finish prep, and I got to weld, route, drill, plane, and assemble. There are two pretty awesome things that have come out of making videos while I've been making projects. First, I'm learning to laugh at myself a lot because I look like a total goober a lot of the time. Like when I didn't realize I still had my hood down for a solid 2 minutes after I'd finished welding and couldn't see where I was going. I was also able to laugh at myself for the total idiocracy of wearing short sleeves while I was welding, but in my defense, I'd just come from shearing my alpacas at the farm and it was really hot outside that day, so I didn't think to bring any longer sleeves. I can't really recommend the short-sleeved approach, not just because of spatter burns, but also because it's actually possible to get a sunburn from the welding arc. The other thing that's been really helpful about watching myself work on camera is picking out techniques I can improve and singling out wasted body movements and inefficiencies. A lot of athletes film themselves for the same reason, and it actually really works well. My hand sawing, hand planing, and sharpening techniques have improved vastly since I started watching myself on camera. Though I took my first fabrication class 5 years ago and have incorporated welding into quite a few projects since that time, welding is something I'm really excited to learn more about. Between blacksmithing, woodwork, and welding, there are really very few projects I can't take on, and I'll be honest, anything having to do with sparks or fire will always get my vote. One of my first goals, though, is to improve my welding technique to the point that my welds look good enough that I don't have to grind, because much like sanding, I absolutely hate grinding, and poor Nick ended up getting a lot of grinding homework, finishing up all the legs after I'd had my fill of the grinding process. finish, that's another area that Nick has been teaching me a lot. From patinas to blackening of steel, I've really liked the things he's come up with for our last couple of fabrication projects. On this one, we used a product called Black Magic, which Nick sprayed on, then quickly neutralized with the hose. We had a major laugh attack when we flipped the table over for the first time because the metal legs were still full of water after their most recent hose down. One thing I really admire about Nick is his resourcefulness. No piece of wood is too small to save for the next project, and no scrap of plywood goes to waste when it comes to his jig making. While I've spent most of my woodworking career avoiding the router like a plague, Nick grew up building cabinets, and so he has a ton of handy-dandy ideas about how to make jigs for his router and really make it work for him. And he finally convinced me during this project to buy my first electric router. With the jig he made, it was such a breeze routing the slots for the leg assemblies into the tabletop. As much as I love hand tools, chopping 2-foot-long mortises by hand is not really my idea of a good time. And about those mortises. There were two purposes to the insetting of the metal legs. First, as a safeguard against horizontal racking, and second, because I just think it looks better, more professional, more intentional to have the legs inset into the tabletop. It makes things a lot more complicated during the assembly process, but it's details like those that make a simple piece of furniture elegant and refined. Whenever you combine two different mediums, like metal and wood, it's crucial to consider how they will interact with one another. Because wood expands and contracts with seasonal moisture changes, you can't just bolt on some metal legs and hope for the best, or come midsummer humidity or midwinter bone-dry weather, your table will completely blow apart. Wood expands and contracts across the grain, basically getting fatter in humidity and skinnier in dry weather, but it doesn't really change along its length. And now lift with your back. Here's the moment of truth. Oh God, oh God.
Where did that come from?
You know exactly where it came from. So to accommodate for that lateral movement, we elongated the mortises for the leg assemblies by 1/2 inch. We also elongated the holes in the metal for the bolts that would attach the top to the leg assemblies. The bolts can move freely along the slab. Though this slab came to me pre-flattened, it ended up being a total bear when it came to the finishing process. Curly maple is a notoriously difficult wood to plane. Just looking at it the wrong way will often cause tear out. A sharp blade and a nice tight mouth on the plane is the key to getting good results with a tricky wood like that. Because this wood was flat sawn across the entire tree, the grain is going one direction on one side of the pith and the opposite direction on the other side of the pith, and in several spots the grain seemed to change direction inexplicably just to exercise my patience. After a whole lot of fussing, it was finally ready for finish. There were a lot of things about this project that made it one of my favorites to date. Working with Nick, helping Mrs. Sittner create an awesome surprise for her husband, and stepping way outside my normal design zone to make sure that they got exactly what they wanted. An heirloom quality piece of furniture with a modern, rustic feel. And then just like that, after the final coat of finish and the donkey drool seal of approval, the Sittners loaded it up in their truck and took it home.